At 0845, the assembly hall inside Shepherd Air Force Base was packed wall to wall. Rows of uniformed personnel stood in crisp formation, boots aligned with precision along the polished floor. The air smelled faintly of fresh wax and starch, thick with the kind of controlled tension that precedes a high-ranking inspection. A buzz moved through the formation as the double doors opened. General Lawrence Simmons entered with his entourage of officers, each decorated with rows of ribbons and badges, their steps synchronized without needing command. Simmons had served 3 combat tours, earned 2 Bronze Stars, and was now touring every major base as part of a leadership initiative for officer development. The cameras were already rolling when he stepped up onto the low riser near the flag. At 0847, the order was called. Attention. Every hand rose into a firm salute. The snap of movement echoed through the chamber like synchronized percussion. Every soldier, every civilian contractor in uniform, everyone but one. She was small, barely over 5'4", standing at the rear near the maintenance access corridor. Her uniform was standard issue for logistics support, clean but plain, with no visible name tape or rank insignia. She wore no ribbons, no patches. Just a tucked-in shirt and fatigue pants like any support worker might. Her posture was correct, shoulders back, heels together, hands folded behind her back. But she didn't salute. A lieutenant 2 rows in turned his head, then looked again. His eyes narrowed. Then he stepped out of line and walked briskly down the aisle between formations. The microphones didn't catch what he said, but his voice didn't need them. Civilian or not, stand at attention and salute the general. She didn't move. She didn't blink. Her eyes remained forward, fixed somewhere past the sea of bodies. The silence shifted. It wasn't loud, but it moved like a ripple, a rustle of uniforms, a few whispers. The kind of unease that spreads when something unscripted happens in a place built on structure. Who is she? Why is she still? What the hell is she doing? General Simmons paused mid-step, already noticing the break in rhythm. He glanced across the hall, eyes scanning the frozen formation. Then he broke off from his group and walked alone down the center aisle, past a row of senior NCOs, past a colonel who instinctively stepped aside. He reached the back of the room in under 30 seconds. The woman was still there, still unmoved, still silent. Simmons stopped 4 feet from her. His voice, when it came, was calm and clipped, the kind of control learned over decades of command. Is there a problem here? Specialist. She looked up. Her eyes met his with a clarity that didn't flinch. Her voice, when it came, wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. You left my unit to die, sir. The effect was immediate, like someone had hit the emergency stop on a moving aircraft. The hum of low camera equipment, the faint sound of a compressor somewhere behind the wall, even the shuffling of boots, everything halted. General Simmons stared at her, unsure if he heard correctly. One of the majors behind him took a step forward, then paused. A few of the enlisted in the back row exchanged uncertain glances. The lieutenant who had confronted her stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. She didn't speak again. She didn't have to. It was 0849 when the stillness broke. A single senior chief, standing off to the side of the formation, lowered his salute slowly. He looked at the woman, then at the general, then lowered his eyes. Something unspoken passed through the room. The general's aide leaned in and whispered something, but Simmons didn't respond. He just looked at her again, trying to place the face, the name, the words. What unit? Her voice was softer now, but it still carried. Raven 12, Firebase Red Echo, October 19th, 2016. He blinked. That name hadn't been said out loud in years. Raven 12 had been classified, buried deep. A failed recon mission during his second tour in Afghanistan. Lost team. 0 survivors. At least, that's what the report had said. He didn't remember her. Or maybe he did. The air in the room was colder now, though the temperature hadn't changed. One of the younger officers at the far wall swallowed hard. Another shifted his eyes toward the camera crew, who by now had stopped filming but hadn't turned anything off. The woman, still standing perfectly still, didn't look away. No one else moved. No one dared to speak. At 04:52 every morning, before the first briefing lights came on and long before the flight line stirred to life, Emily Tran walked across the tarmac at Shepherd Air Force Base. She carried no coffee, no clipboard, no visible rank, just a data tablet tucked under one arm and a low-key utility bag strapped across her shoulder. Her uniform was always regulation neat, though she never wore name tapes. Most people didn't know where she came from. Fewer even knew what department she technically worked in. By the time junior officers filtered into their offices, Emily had already run diagnostics on the T6 Texan 2 simulators in Hangar 4. She recalibrated communication settings on the older transceivers, sometimes hand-coding adjustments that newer techs didn't know how to do manually. She reviewed munitions logs against live training schedules, double-checking the compatibility of each weapons load with projected sim scenarios. Her name never appeared on planning memos, but systems didn't run right if she wasn't there. The official paperwork listed her as civilian logistics support under tactical systems, not command track, not uniformed, not operational, but somewhere along the chain, everyone began defaulting to her for answers. One lieutenant once forgot to close a frequency loop before a radio drill. It was Emily who walked in, silently flipped 2 switches, and corrected the mismatch in under 5 seconds. When asked how she noticed, she just said the ping sounded off. Most cadets didn't know what to make of her. Some joked she lived in the hangar. Others called her the Ghost. Ghost of Hangar 4. She didn't respond to the nickname. She rarely responded at all, unless it was work-related. She didn't attend morale events. She didn't linger at the chow hall at 11:47 daily. She ate alone near the auxiliary power room, never taking more than 10 minutes. People noticed how she moved fluid, efficient, like someone who didn't waste motion. When she adjusted antenna coordinates or tested uplinks, she didn't rely on visual monitors. She listened. She could tell which radar channel wasn't syncing from the cadence of the return signal. She fixed jamming issues faster than the software itself could flag the alerts. She never bragged, never lectured. But sometimes, in briefings, she'd offer a correction when a spec officer misstated a comms protocol. Always factual, always precise, never personal. A few NCOs once teased her about being too intense for a desk job. She didn't blink. She just handed them the correct field manual page and walked out. What people didn't understand was how she knew the things she knew. She wasn't just efficient, she was exact. She never hesitated in pressure scenarios. During quarterly drills, when radio traffic got chaotic, she managed frequencies faster than anyone in the tower. Her hands didn't shake. Her tone never rose. She coordinated redirect orders for medevacs during simulated multi-casualty events without ever touching the panic key. A captain once tried to quiz her in front of cadets, half joking, half curious, asked if she could name the NATO phonetic alphabet backward. She did. Then recited 5 obsolete call sign tables that hadn't been used since 2013. Then asked, quietly, if he wanted her to keep going. He didn't. Still, no one knew where she'd trained. Her personnel file was minimal. No combat service medals, no deployment history listed, just a few vague references to prior assignments at Fort Hood and Kirtland. Most assumed she'd always been civilian. Some figured she was prior, enlisted, and burned out. No one asked directly. She didn't offer. The airmen around her began treating her like a fixture, always present, always functional, never questioned. She became part of the daily rhythm of the base, like morning flags or flight line checks. People stopped wondering why she never joined Group PT. They forgot to notice she never smiled during graduations. They didn't ask why she sometimes stared out at the parked Texan 2s like she was somewhere else entirely. She was just Emily, tech support, logistics, quiet, steady, and in the strange, unspoken way military places work. Her silence became the background noise everyone accepted, until the day she broke it. It was under 8:50 when the room began to shift. Emily's words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed with a weight that rippled through the ranks in a way no command ever could. A few heads turned instinctively toward the command staff. Others looked straight ahead, eyes unfocused, processing. For the first time in the hall, no one seemed to know the correct protocol. General Simmons didn't respond. He stared at her like she'd spoken in a different language. His jaw moved slightly, like he might say something, but nothing came out. Behind him, a major lowered his gaze. One colonel took a subtle half-step back. Then the silence got heavier. By 08:53 in a small office just off the main hall, Lieutenant Ryan Carter stood frozen in front of a secure terminal. He had stepped out early to update briefing notes. Instead, he was typing search parameters into an archived internal database, eyes locked on the monitor. He wasn't sure what prompted him to check. Maybe it was the woman's voice. Maybe the date. Maybe the name she said. Firebase Red Echo, Raven 12, October 19, 2016. Carter wasn't old enough to remember it firsthand, but the database responded like it did. The file didn't open completely. It was segmented, partially redacted, but it was there. Operation Sandmantle. Raven 12 listed as a recon element, deployed for forward observation near the eastern boundary of Nangarhar Province. 6 personnel, deep insertion, no immediate support, surveillance and early threat detection. The record showed a medevac request logged at 13:47 local time, radioed in by the unit's commanding officer. It indicated 3 killed in action, 2 critical wounded, 1 operator maintaining comms. The GPS coordinates were precise. Grid 41331. Fire zone overlay showed active conflict. Within 12 minutes, the file showed a command override. Redirect medevac to grid 44789. Priority unit identified. Resources reallocated. The override was signed, not typed. A scanned authorization image. Lieutenant Carter leaned in. Colonel Lawrence D. Simmons, Task Force 3-6 Command, Regional South. The timestamp was clear. The signature field was verified. It wasn't a mistake. Carter sat back in his chair. For a second, he didn't breathe. The rest of the file went dark after that. Final mission status, total unit loss. No survivors confirmed. But one line stood out. At the bottom of the report, beneath casualty confirmation, there was an appended note. It looked like an afterthought, written in a different format. Unverified survivor account. E. Tran, Tech Sergeant, status unreliable witness, combat trauma, acute disorientation, no debrief report included. He stared at the screen. His hand hovered over the mouse, not sure what to click next. Part of him wanted to close it, pretend he hadn't seen it. Another part already knew that wasn't an option. Not now. Not with her standing in that hall. Eyes level, voice steady, bringing names back from where the system had buried them. At 08:59, Carter printed a screenshot to a secure drive. Then he stood, took a breath, and walked toward the command suite. The weight in his chest didn't come from rank. It came from knowing a record hadn't just been lost. It had been ignored. On purpose. It was 02:13 when the night watch at Forward Operating Base Mace spotted the movement. At first, they thought it was a stray animal, something low to the ground, dragging itself across the outer edge of the perimeter. Then the infrared confirmed a human silhouette. Barely upright. Unarmed. The gate guards approached with rifles drawn, but no warning shots were fired. Whoever it was, they weren't a threat. They weren't even walking. The figure collapsed 6 meters from the gate. Dust clung to her face. Her boots were scorched. Her left sleeve had burned away, exposing blistered skin down to her wrist. She was covered in dried blood that wasn't all hers. Her hands gripped something tight against her chest. When the medic tried to take it, she didn't let go. Inside the triage tent, under low light, they realized what she was holding. 6 dog tags, bound together by parachute cord, the edges blackened. Each tag belonged to someone listed as KIA from Raven 12. She said their names over and over, refusing painkillers. When they asked who she was, she gave her name and rank: Tech Sergeant Emily Tran, Communications, assigned to Raven 12 under Task Force 3 to 6. The medic logged the information. An intelligence officer arrived 30 minutes later. Emily was dehydrated, half-conscious, voice raw from exposure. But she kept repeating the same thing. Command override. Wrong grid. We were abandoned. She begged someone to pull the comm logs. She said she had coordinates. Said they could still hear enemy traffic. She whispered call signs no one had used in years. By 0740, her blood pressure stabilized enough for formal questioning. She was placed in a debrief room. Her report was taken, typed, then sealed. No transcript ever made it into the base's permanent records. The officer who led the debrief never submitted a second opinion. Instead, a new file was created. Attached to her medical report was a note. Subject experienced severe trauma. Mental state unstable. Account deemed unreliable. Within a week, she was transferred. No ceremony. No follow-up. No official statement. She was listed as returned under non-combat designation and reassigned to low-impact duty at a stateside training base. No awards were issued. No family contacts were made. Raven 12 remained classified as a total loss. The after-action report listed no survivors. People on base stopped asking what happened. She never spoke about it again. She followed orders. She moved when told. She accepted the transfer. And when she arrived at Shepherd Air Force Base 4 months later, no one knew her past. They saw a quiet tech who arrived early and stayed late. No one noticed her hands trembled when she touched old radios. No one asked why she always walked the flight line alone. She didn't fight it. She didn't protest. She just started over. And the truth, like everything else she carried, stayed silent. At 0710 the next morning, Emily Tran was escorted to a secure conference room in Building 3C. The windows were blacked out. Phones were left outside. Inside the room sat General Simmons, 2 senior staff officers, the base JAG representative, and a lieutenant colonel from intelligence. The tension wasn't loud. It hung in the room like humidity, heavy, invisible, and hard to breathe around. The general didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. His tone stayed level, almost clinical. He said he had reviewed what files were available, that he remembered many operations, especially during his second tour, but not every detail, not every call sign. He paused once, looked at Emily, then added that some records were fragmented, that some decisions, especially under pressure, required reallocation of resources for broader tactical needs. He didn't say sorry. He didn't say her name. Emily said nothing at first. She unzipped the front pocket of her logistics pack and removed a small square of scorched metal. She placed it on the table, the sound barely audible but sharp. It was a military ID tag, the chain long gone. The edges were warped, the text partially blackened, but the name was still legible. Harris. C. J. Captain. O positive. USMC. Below that, the etching barely showed a serial code. The general didn't touch it. His eyes held on it for half a second before shifting to the wall behind her. Emily reached back into her pack. This time, she placed a cloth-bound notebook onto the table. Olive green, corners frayed, elastic strap worn loose. She opened it without ceremony. Inside were page after page of handwritten entries, neat block lettering, no crossed-out words, no hesitation. She began to read. Sergeant Allen, B positive, chest trauma from fragmentation burst. Time of injury 1326. Last transmission requesting backup channel frequency. Confirmed reception but no acknowledgement. Corporal Singh, AB negative, left leg amputation from mortar shrapnel. Applied tourniquet. Lost consciousness at 14:02. Died 14:37. Final words tell my son I did good. Private Lang, O positive, gunshot wound to the neck, no airlift, bled out within minutes, shielded the comms array during final relay burst. She didn't look at the general. She didn't raise her voice. She flipped pages slowly, methodically. Every line recorded something: wound pattern, ammunition count, weather condition, call sign exchange, signal strength. One page listed enemy-bearing shifts and compass degrees. Another logged battery life for 2 PRC-152 radios. She had recorded it all while they were dying. When she paused, the room stayed silent. No one moved. A captain on the far side of the table adjusted his pen without writing anything. The general finally leaned forward, touching the edge of the notebook without turning the page. He didn't speak. His hand trembled slightly as he withdrew. Emily closed the notebook. She looked at no one in particular. I was the communications specialist. It was my job to document everything, even when it stopped mattering. She didn't cry. She didn't accuse. She didn't ask for explanation. She just waited. The kind of waiting that comes from carrying truth for too long. The kind that expects nothing but still shows up anyway. At 0724, Emily opened a smaller folder inside her pack and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. It was standard issue military letterhead, yellowed slightly with age. The ink faded but still legible. She placed it gently in front of her on the table. The general watched her hands more than her face. This is a copy of the final radio transmission made by Captain Charles Harris. Raven 12 lead at 13:47 hours, October 19th, 2016. She cleared her throat, then read it aloud. Raven 12 to command. We have 3 confirmed KIA, 2 critically wounded. I repeat, combat ineffective. Request immediate medevac at grid 41331. Holding perimeter under hostile fire. No mobility. Request urgent extraction. Over. She let the words hang in the air for a full 5 seconds before continuing. The room remained motionless. Command response at 13:49 hours. Raven 12, redirect medevac to grid 44789. Priority asset rerouted. Maintain current position. Over. Emily looked up. Grid 44789 was 10.3 kilometers east, across open terrain under direct observation from elevated enemy position. We had no vehicle, no cover, and 2 men bleeding out. Captain Harris didn't respond to that last order. There was nothing left to say. No one in the room spoke. A senior officer stared at the table like he was waiting for something to materialize. The general's jaw flexed slightly, but his mouth stayed closed. Captain Harris died 22 minutes later. His radio was in my lap. I heard the static as his vitals stopped. I transmitted one last call. No answer. I buried the radio under his vest so no one would track the beacon. Then I started walking. Her tone didn't waver. She wasn't trying to shock anyone. She wasn't seeking an apology. Each word she delivered felt like a report neutral. Clean, but impossibly heavy. Private Lang was the youngest. 19. He held my hand while he bled out and made me promise to carry their tags. I had no right to survive, but I did. She pulled a slip of weatherproof notepaper from the folder. It was torn at the top. The corner melted. The ink was blurred, but still readable. Grid 44789 confirmed by Colonel L. Simmons, Task Force 3-6. Priority unit reroute logged 1349. I wrote it down while watching Captain Harris lose consciousness. The general's eyes didn't lift from the table. His fingers touched his lower lip, then dropped again. He still hadn't said a word. She leaned back in her chair, her voice steady. I am not here to undo what happened. I know what tactical command means. I know how decisions are made under pressure. But I also know 5 people died because that redirect left us there. Their names were erased. I was erased. And for 8 years, I've worked in silence because no one believed me. Or worse, no one wanted to remember. Emily looked around the room. No anger, just presence. This is not a request. It's not a grievance. It's just the last message. Delivered. Finally. 8 years late. But delivered. No one moved. The only sound came from the low hum of the fluorescent lights above. The room stayed still long after Emily finished speaking. No one looked at each other. No one reached for notes or spoke into comms. The air felt heavier, not from heat, but from something unspoken settling over everyone inside. The kind of stillness that follows when something undeniable finally lands. General Simmons didn't move right away. His eyes were locked on the melted dog tag. The notebook beside it remained closed, but the weight of its contents had already shifted the room. His hand rested on the table, fingers curled slightly, as if holding on to something he couldn't name. At 07:39, the general stood. It wasn't sudden. He rose like a man letting go of anchors one at a time. His posture straightened, his shoulders squared, but there was no bravado in it, no command presence. Just a man facing something too long ignored. He brought his right hand to his brow. The motion was crisp, silent. He held it for 3 seconds before lowering it slowly. One by one, the officers around the table followed. Some looked at Emily, some didn't. But all of them stood. All of them saluted. She did not return it. Emily remained seated for a moment, then reached into her pack one last time. She pulled out the cord-bound set of 6 dog tags. They were worn, edges dulled from years of being handled. Without speaking, she placed them next to the notebook. There was no ceremony, no pause for effect. Just a quiet offering placed into the care of those who had forgotten them. Then she looked at the general. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. "These don't belong to me anymore. They belong to memory." No one responded. There was nothing to say that wouldn't lessen what she had already given. The salutes slowly dropped, but no one sat. It wasn't protocol anymore. It was something else. Something older than rank. She nodded once. Not a goodbye, not dismissal, just acknowledgement. Then she turned and walked toward the door. The only sound was her boots across the tile. The door didn't close with force. It latched quietly behind her. For a long time after she left, the room stayed frozen. The dog tags sat on the table beside the notebook. No one reached for them. No one took a picture. They just sat there. Physical proof of a truth that had finally been spoken aloud. Outside, the sun was rising. The flight line was already waking. Cadets ran drills. Techs ran checklists on training aircraft. The base moved forward like it always had. But inside that conference room, nothing felt the same. And for the first time, no one questioned why she hadn't saluted. Emily stayed at Shepherd for 3 more months. Nothing about her routine changed. She still arrived before sunrise, still ran diagnostics on the simulators, still checked radio logs by hand even when no one asked her to. Cadets greeted her with quiet respect now. Some nodded. Others simply stepped aside when she passed. No one called her ghost anymore. The invitations came quickly. A leadership summit wanted her as keynote. A veterans memorial in D.C. offered to fly her first class. A base in Arizona asked if she would speak at their graduation. She declined them all. Not with anger, not with pride. Just a soft, steady no. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. Let those who didn't come back speak instead. Her locker remained the same, mostly, but those who knew what to look for began to notice. Inside, folded in a weatherproof pouch, were 6 letters, each written by family members of her fallen teammates. One from Sergeant Allen's sister, one from Private Lang's mother, dated years after the mission. Each was short, handwritten, full of love. She never displayed them. She just kept them close. Next to the letters was a red cloth patch from Corporal Singh's old recon unit, a training ribbon Lang had kept from basic, a medic's coin from Staff Sergeant Patel, still wrapped in the same gauze he'd used on her shoulder. Tiny things. Nothing valuable. But together, they were the weight she carried, without showing it. She never spoke their names aloud on base, but when she ran checks on the SIM frequencies, she always paused at channel 12. She didn't log anything there. She just waited a few seconds, then moved on. She wasn't angry. She wasn't broken. She wasn't waiting for anything. She just worked. quiet, steady, present. And in that silence, she kept the memory of Raven 12 alive longer than any award or speech ever could. It happened quietly, just like everything else with her. One Monday morning, Emily's desk was empty. The light on her workstation was off. Her toolkit was gone. The chair still tucked in. The floor beneath swept clean. No one had seen her leave. No one remembered her saying goodbye. On the center of her desk, folded once and taped down at the edge, was a single piece of lined paper. The handwriting was clean, unhurried. "I'm not disappearing. I just needed the truth to stand." That was it. The news made its way through the base in slow waves. No announcement was made. No farewell lunch. But those who had watched her work, those who had stood in that conference room when she told the story no one else could carry, they knew. She wasn't running from anything. She had simply finished what she came to do. A week later, someone from admin found the transfer request. It had been filed weeks earlier. She'd requested reassignment to a support post in interior Alaska. Remote. Isolated. A base known mostly for cold weather training and equipment testing. She hadn't asked for promotion. Just another logistics role. Another place to work. Another place to serve. Rumors spread, as they always do. That she'd chosen the base because it was quiet. That she wanted distance. That she preferred places where radios mattered more than speeches. No one knew for sure. She left no forwarding address. But on October 19th, just after morning colors, something appeared at the new memorial wall near the entrance to the base. 6 small American flags, each one planted in the ground with precision, spaced evenly beneath the metal Raven 12 plaque. No note, no signature, no ceremony. A few people walked past without noticing. A few stopped. One young cadet saluted. Later that day, someone checked the base logs. No outside visitors. No transport arrivals unaccounted for. Whoever left the flags hadn't come through the gate that morning. But everyone who knew understood. She was never trying to be seen. She never asked to be remembered. But she remembered. That was always the point. And somewhere, in a place without speeches or cameras or halls full of uniforms, Emily Tran was likely still waking before dawn, still checking munitions codes by hand, still showing up. Not to be recognized, but to serve. Because for some people, carrying memory is a duty that never ends.